Back to basics. This video is kind of geared towards basic checks. Powers, grounds, current flow, and proper loaded voltage drop checks. It just so happens that I'm working on a misfire and dealing with an ignition coil, but this sort of testing could go for any sort of an electrical component that needs power, ground, current flow, and to make sure that all the voltage drops are good. This is a 2005 Nissan Altima QR 2.5. It only has like 37,000 miles on it. It keeps setting misfire codes, and from what I've gathered, the coils have been swapped around, and spark plugs have probably been swapped around and all that stuff. And the story that I'm getting is the misfire does not follow the coil or follow the ignition. So they're worried about some sort of like intake valve sticking, exhaust valve sticking, compression loss due to the low mileage. So they asked me to look at it and verify or not verify that. But before I dove off into the deep end of the pool, I decided to check the basics. And this video is kind of geared towards that. If you're a new picoscope user or a scope user in general, this is the type of testing that you need to be doing on any sort of electrical issue. At the very end, after the case study's over, I'm going to do like a little extra bonus footage, if you want to call it that, of how I actually load test circuits. And I want to go over a little mishap that happened. It's been some time back, but it's still a viable lesson to be learned. Just wanted to say that amp clamp you see right there in that capture is a Pico amp clamp. It's a clamp that I've had for over 10 years. It's served me extremely well. And anyone who has a scope or is getting a scope, do yourself a favor. Get yourself a quality low amp clamp. Other than test leads, you're going to use that more than anything. I'll put a part number to that exact clamp. I bought it at Auto Nerds, of course, and there'll be a link in the description to Auto Nerds. And I think they're about 130 bucks, 140 bucks. Well worth the investment if you're going to get into this style of testing, which in today's world, you should be into this style of testing. So back to the basics. I'm going to go over captures. We're going to look at some in-car stuff, some in-shop stuff. I did this with the cell phone. Sorry, the GoPro was not going. So you're going to have the black screen. So I hope it looks all right. My editing skills are, I wouldn't even call them skills. So I'm just going to put up what I've got, and I hope you guys get something out of it. And as always, thanks for watching, subscribing, and sharing. And shout out to all you guys that heard about me on the last Nissan Tech Talk. And thanks for Pete and all you guys out there that kind of promoted my channel. I certainly appreciate it. And I'm hoping everybody can learn something out of this thing, because that's what we're here for. Anyways, enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. 2005 Nissan Altima. It's a 2.5 liter engine. This thing legitimately only has 32,700 miles on it. I'm told it's a very intermittent cylinder 3 misfire, which that is the DTC I've got. The coils have been swapped around, and allegedly it does not follow the coil. Now what I've done so far is I've started it cold. It started misfiring. I can't get really any fuel trim data that's going to be much good because the engine is literally really cold. But it is misfiring. So one thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go to the sharpshooter tab, and I'm going to hit, this is a relative compression done by the tool, and I'm going to hit start. And I'm just going to do a real quick, let's see if this is a mechanical problem or not, or maybe that'll give me direction. So I'm going to do this. All right, give that time to go off. save raw data. We'll cancel that. So it's showing a small loss here. Nothing too crazy up here. I'm not saying I'm going to ignore this, but as of right now, I'm going to kind of let this go. I don't know which cylinder this is, because this gets its information, I'm sure, through the 12 volts of the DLC. But it's kind of a quick down and dirty test while this thing's actually actively misfiring to let me know if it maybe have a valve sticking due to the low mileage. As of right now, I don't think that's the problem. But while it's misfiring, I'm going to go out under the hood and see if I can't narrow this down real quick before we get any tools out. And I'll bring you back in as testing proceeds. Thanks. So after I did that relative compression check, I kind of realized that I'm probably not dealing with a valve sticking issue. So I went ahead and started the engine. I already had the hood up. It's misfiring. I pulled the plug, the connection, the electrical connection off of number 3, no change. I took the hold down screw out and lifted the coil up. It was not sparking or snapping. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm focused solely on number 3. I need to get the car in the shop, get the scope hooked up, and see if I'm missing power, missing ground, if I'm missing ignition control, or IC as I refer it, to just, you know, give me further direction. I have eliminated mechanical issue. Moving on to the basics: power, ground, current flow, and voltage drop. So any new scope guys out there, guys or gals, a good basic setup for most, I'm gonna say 90% of all automotive testing, including secondary ignition, is this right here: 500 milliseconds per division, 5 megasample. This will give you plenty of time on the screen. I think you'll get 4 buffers, and it'll give you a 1 microsecond sample interval. And here's the beauty of it: you don't have to remember all that stuff. Go up here to views, go to properties, and it'll show you. So until you get used to your scope, you can, as you're recording or as the scope's running, you can dial this up, dial this down, and watch it real time until you get the sample rate and sample interval you want. I've been using this setup for forever. It was taught to me, and that's just the way I roll with the scope. If I go to CAN, which I'm not going to get into a lot of it right now, I have lots of videos out, you definitely need to get this up higher and get this number smaller. But you have to look at my CAN videos for more info on that. There again, this is an old 4423 scope. The newer ones are faster, especially at longer time bases like this. So you may be able to run this at 4. I can't remember. I don't have a 4425 scope, but either way, this is a good setup. Back to the basics. So let's look at the capture. In this capture, I have put a fuse loop in the IPDM, and I'm looking at all coil currents. Something to be leery of: if there are other things on that circuit, they're going to show up if they're on and off. So just have that in the back of your mind if you see some really weird readings on your coils. But the capture is good enough to tell me what I need to know. The blue trace right at the top, this is number 1. This is number 1's ignition command. I've kind of got it as a sync. And you see number 1's coil current. There's number 3. This is my cylinder in question. Let me move this down. So number 3 is getting a command. Seems to be in time, but yet I've got no current flow. So do I have no power or no ground? It's really my only options. You can see the next cylinder in the firing order is got current flow, it's working, so on and so forth. Then it repeats. So with this first capture, what I've learned is I need to check power and ground, and I need to load test power and ground to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to show you a video. I'm going to do the capture first, which we just looked at, and then I'm going to show you the video and kind of give you a visual of how I was hooked up. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up next, and then we'll go over the power and ground. So stay tuned. Here's the first setup. All the coil currents, fuse box. You see somebody's numbered all the coils and has switched them, but I'm checking the IC here at number 3 and the IC at number 1. And we saw I did have IC but no current, so powers and grounds are next. Alright, so here's the capture of powers and grounds. I got the power ground, still got the IC on 3 and all the current. Just one quick note, I'm using Pico 6. If you guys are using Pico 7, the sample rate and the sample interval is different. I don't want to expand on it too much because I don't use Pico 7 very often. I've been using 6 for a long time, and I'm just slow to change. Maybe one day as I start getting more familiar with 7, I'll start doing videos with 7. It's just a little out of my comfort zone. So everything that I do on my channel as of this video is Pico 6. This build is still available on Auto Nerds. I don't know if Pico has it on their website, but this is the last Pico 6 build, and I'm still clinging to it. It works good for me. So bear that in mind if you're playing with your scope and your screen looks totally different than mine. You're probably running Pico 7. The beauty of it is you can run 6 and 7 on the same laptop, which I do. I'm slowly, like I said, I'm slowly warming up to it. So back to the capture. This is power, this is ground, this is IC, and this is the coil current still at the IPDM. You can see I've started the vehicle and it's running and it's misfiring. So a lot of noise in here, so I'm just going to go over here where it's a little less noisy because it's misfiring steady. And let's see, let's move this over and cut out 1 engine cycle. Right there. See, we're still missing coil current on number 3. We still have the command for number 3. There's the ground. Let's put a little filter on the ground just because. So here's the power. It's a common power, so you can see the voltage drops in all the other coils. There's a clue. We see I still have voltage available at the coil. We see I still have ground available at the coil, and we still see that there's no current flow. Another clue is how flat the ignition control signal is across the top. Usually when current flows through these, they're more of a knife edge. I forgot to point that out in the first video, but if you rewind back to the first capture, I mean, you'll kind of see the slanted upwards. That's usually a good indicator that there's current flowing, and when they're flat, they're not. So this is where I'm going to kind of get into the end of the video. I'm going to go over voltage drop testing, and there is a little rabbit hole that one could fall in. Back probing. Now, I'm a big proponent of back probing circuits and systems while they're active, and that's all fine. That's the way I do it, and I'm doing it right now. This car's running, and I have 12 volts there, and I have ground there, and my ground and 12 volts are common to all these coils. So I'm thinking at this point, I don't have a power or ground problem. This car needs an ignition coil. And honestly, that's what fixes the car. I put a coil in the car. It's not magical, but I still went through the paces of unplugging this coil and load testing the power and ground with the coil unplugged. And that's where the little bonus footage is. I'm going to show another video And anybody that follows me on Instagram has already seen the video, but hadn't seen the scope capture or what I'm going to explain, where I kind of had to help a fella out of a rabbit hole because of testing like this and assuming that he was load testing everything. And I'll go over that. I'll put a service manual picture up to give you a visual and to see what I'm saying. So, in a nutshell, we did a relative compression. Good. We verified number 3 was not firing. We verified number 3 had signal. We have verified and will verify number 3 has power and ground. It has everything in life to succeed, but yet it does not. So number 3 coil goes in the trash. It gets replaced, and I will show you the good capture, although it's not much different than this one, other than there's 4 green spikes, and I can't remember if I've got an IC back probed or not. But hang on, I've got a little bit more stuff coming, and then we'll get into the voltage drop testing. So here's the good capture with the new coil in it. I'm still back probed in number 1, but we can see that I have 4 distinct coil currents. And what I was referring to, the slanted top, is basically that right there. Usually when current is flowing through a coil, you'll get this sort of a reflection in the ignition control. And you've seen earlier when I had 3 back probed and it was not firing. It was flat across the top. So kind of a little tip, kind of a hint. I still would rather have a current clamp on just to verify 100%, because you never know, current could be flowing from some sort of a short or something that's not the coil. So get yourself a good clamp. The nice thing about a clamp is it measures indirectly, so even if you have like a 2204 scope or something that has a small input, you can put this clamp around stuff without having to really worry about attenuators, because it's not really a direct measurement. So that's it for the video. I think I have a follow-up video in the shop, and then I'm going to go over just a quick little rant on voltage drop testing. So thank you guys for following so far, and I appreciate it. So when I got the car, the coils were marked just like this. Unfortunately, the person who marked the coils wasn't the first person that swapped the coils. So essentially the bad coil has been swapped around from hole to hole, and nobody knew it. But after we verified IC, load test, power, and ground, pin fits good, it's a bad coil. So sometimes you got to play detective and technician. So I get asked, how do I load test circuits? Well, I use these load throw leads, and there's a little resistor in here, and it applies some current. So I've got a mess here, but I'm going to try to show you the meter and the scope. I'm basically back probed into power and ground at this coil. So I'm going to put you on the voltmeter, and I'm going to push the button, and that just load tested by power and ground. Now I'll put you over here on the scope screen. See the current go up. So in the video, you saw where I actually unplugged the connector at number 3 to do a proper voltage drop test. And the reason is, in order to do a proper voltage drop test, you have to have current flowing. Well, my Pico capture clearly showed there was no current flowing on number 3. So by me simply having a back probe here at the power and a back probe here, I wasn't doing a proper voltage drop test. And I'm going to show you another diagram where a coworker kind of got bit by it. He didn't get bit bad. We were able to get out from under it and get the car fixed without having to go back to the customer. But I wanted to show you this real quick. This is the IC number 3. This is the signal coming from the computer that turns the transistor on, that allows the power to flow through the primary to ground. And then when it's cut, the ground's cut, the magnetic field collapses, charges the secondary, and there's a diode right there, and that's how we get spark. Now the current clamp, I'm farther upstream. You can see it's a common power, and about 2 pages up farther is the other 2 coils. But I'm clamped around this, so that way I can see each coil charge and fire if they're all working. And you can see they have a common ground. That makes it nice when you're looking at stuff with an amp clamp. But let me go to another page here. And the story is this. Good technician had a truck come in with a vent control valve code. Now, where I live at, we don't do emissions testing. So people ride around with their check engine lights on constantly. If the car's not running bad, they don't worry about it. And I think that was the case with this vehicle. So it had an evap vent control valve code. The dude, he pulled the code up. He goes to the back of the car. He back probes power. He back probes ground, which is, straight fused power. Straight fused ground. And he's active testing it with the scan tool. He's using a voltmeter, and on his voltmeter, it's going 12 volts, 0 volts, 12 volts, 0 volts. There's no activity here. You can't hear any mechanical moving. So he rightly condemned the evap control valve, priced the job, got the approval, put the part on. As a good technician should do, is he followed up and checked his repair. Well, the code was still there. The active test still would not work, but now he put his voltmeter here and here. Now he had something like 4 volts on his meter. And he says, Mike, what the hell? What do I got going on? He goes, I had 12 volts when I did my first voltage drop check, and now I've only got 4. What he failed or overlooked is if this coil within whatever you're testing, whether it's that ignition coil that I just replaced, or it's an evap sensor or anything with a coil of wire, if this circuit's open, you're basically checking open source voltage. And that's why I unplug. After I'm to the point that I'm wanting to do powers and grounds, I'm willing to start unplugging things. And once he put that new valve in, which the old valve was bad, he has now completed the circuit. And now back probing here and here is a proper voltage drop check using a voltmeter. The guy that owned the truck had a boat, and he was backing boats in and out of water, and corrosion had set into the harness, and we were able to fix the harness because he had high resistance farther up. But with that valve being open, it wasn't a proper test. So I used the load probe leads. Before I got load probe leads, I would use a light bulb. In fact, I still use a light bulb. It's just, if I'm doing small circuitry or light duty circuitry, I'll call it, I'll use the load probe leads. If I'm using bigger current carrying parts of the car, I tend to steer towards more of an incandescent bulb. But just bear that in mind. If you're testing this dynamically, which I am a huge fan of testing dynamically, and that coil is open, essentially it is open source voltage. You have not done a voltage drop check. Unplug, use whatever method you feel comfortable with, and do it properly. Like I said, we still needed the valve. We went back, we found the high resistance, we soldered a new wire and got the truck fixed. And the guy, he felt terrible. He felt like he had covered all of his bases, which he did, except for one little detail. But that's a lesson learned, and that's something he'll never forget. And what are the chances of this thing having two problems at the same time? Like I said, I feel like this valve was probably bad for months, and the corrosion had just, because it had Scotch locks from the hitch, and I don't know. Anyways, that's my little spiel on that. Do voltage drop tests however you feel comfortable doing it, as long as you do it. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you guys.